Welcome back to the show. Well, talks today between the PM and state premiers on Australia's future energy policy look like getting a whole lot more interesting. Fairfax Papers are reporting this morning the Turnbull government has been sitting on advice that an emissions intensity scheme would actually save households and businesses a whopping $15 billion. Joining us now to talk the week in politics is Minister for Revenue and Financial Services Kelly O'Dwyer from Melbourne.
Good morning.
And here in the studio, Shadow Transport and Infrastructure Minister Anthony Albanese. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Lisa and Kelly.
Hi. Kelly, I'll start with you. Malcolm Turnbull has publicly stated that a carbon pricing scheme would push prices up, but this report by the Australian Electricity Market Commission says that is definitely not the case. Have you got this badly wrong?
Well, look, I haven't seen the report, but I can say to you that the last time that a big economy-wide carbon tax was imposed on the Australian economy, it did actually push up electricity prices. It punished pensioners, it punished businesses, it punished families, and we got rid of it. We actually don't want high electricity prices. We don't want to have high energy costs, and we need to have secure and affordable energy, and that's what we're delivering, and we're meeting our emissions reductions targets to boot.
Well, Kelly's got the talking points, but the facts are different. And the facts have been presented to COAG today. This is a report that was commissioned by the national electricity sector, and it shows that costs would come down by $15 billion over a decade for households and for businesses. Malcolm Turnbull's been sitting on this report. You had Josh Frydenberg earlier on in the week say they'd consider an emissions intensity scheme. And what we had then was it ruled out after 48 hours, even though Malcolm Turnbull knows full well this would be good for the economy, good for households and good for the environment.
Kelly, has the Prime Minister turned into a climate change sceptic, or is he just keeping Cory Bernardi happy by smacking down Josh Frydenberg?
Look, the Prime Minister's been entirely consistent. He's always said that it's important for us.
He used to believe in climate change.
No, he still does.
Before he was leader.
He absolutely still does.
And he used to believe in a price on carbon. He said it over and over again.
We've got an emissions reduction fund that is actually making sure that we can reduce our carbon emissions without punishing pensioners, without punishing people.
Well,
I mean, you've got a plan to actually not only introduce a new carbon tax, but to actually make it cost even more.
See, that's where these talking points are just nonsense. Absolute nonsense. The emissions intensity scheme... They are. The emissions intensity scheme has been shown that it would drive prices down. Now, it's one thing to be a carbon sceptic, but it's another thing for a Liberal Party to be market sceptics. And that's what they're saying here, that the markets don't work, that a command-style
But we've got a market scheme with the emissions reduction fund.
You have a top-down Stalinist approach of picking winners. What an emissions intensity scheme... Well, what an emissions intensity scheme would do, it's a closed sector, so it just applies to within the electricity market, and it would drive down prices for households and businesses.
$15 billion is a huge saving, Kelly. How can you deny that?
Well, the point I'm making is that anything that is going to increase electricity prices, such as a carbon tax, which is what
it's not
the
a
Labor
carbon
policy
tax.
is.
It's not a carbon tax. It's an emissions intensity scheme.
It'd be nice
so
to
stop
finish.
saying nonsense.
It'd be nice to actually be able to finish the question.
Well, stop saying rubbish, like using the slogan. You have a serious report here.
You don't need to be. You don't need to be rude just because you don't like what I'm saying.
Well, you don't need to make things up.
It happens to be the fact. The fact is, you have got an even higher target, which means that in order to implement that, that's what you took to the election. You'll need to impose an even bigger carbon tax. We're saying we're not going to do that.
No one's talking about a carbon tax except for your rhetoric.
We're already reducing our emissions. We're beating our Kyoto targets. We will beat our Paris targets. And we're doing that through an emissions reduction fund. That is a market-based mechanism.
Except that your own advice says that you won't meet the Paris targets.
Kelly,
you've got
the problem
is pills today, I think, Albo.
Kelly, the problem is this week Australia posted its worst economic performance since the global financial crisis in 2008, and I think what people will see out of this is that there's $15 billion worth of savings which this country desperately needs, and the government is rejecting it.
Well, look, the national accounts were very clear. Now, it's true that they weren't as good as we would have liked, but what I would say is that the economy is still growing faster than other economies, advanced economies around the world.
But we haven't got the jobs and growth that the Prime Minister promised us.
Well, let me just finish on that. I mean, we're growing faster than Canada. We're growing faster than the USA. We're not growing as fast as the UK, but it underscores exactly what we have been saying as a government all along, which is you cannot be reckless with our economy. We need to ensure that we continue to grow our economy because that is how we will create jobs. And that's why we're cutting the company tax rate for small businesses, because small businesses in this country employ more than 4.5 million Australians. Now, that's being blocked by Labor. That's why we've also got a plan to invest $50 billion in infrastructure, because, again, we need to invest in assets that are going to keep the country moving. And that's why we've got a plan to make sure that our economy continues to move forward through investment.
The economy shrunk in the last quarter by 0.5%. There's no global financial crisis, there weren't cyclones, there's no reason other than government incompetence. And when it comes to infrastructure, they actually have cut spending on infrastructure. They said last year they'd spend $8 billion in the last year. They spent $5.5 billion, a 30% cut in what they said they would do.
All right, I think you both have equal time this morning, Kelly and Albo. We are going to have to leave it there. We are out of time. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.
You too. Good.